U.S. military forces trained for extraterrestrial conflict. Elite military units are specializing in mock space warfare as Russia and China develop anti-satellite weaponry. In a large tin-roofed warehouse near Colorado's Rocky Mountains, members of a team of modern space warriors spent their days hatching plots to defeat the U.S. military in extraterrestrial combat. They're called space aggressors. Their job is to act like an enemy during mock space battles to help U.S. units prepare for a conflict that may one day extend into the cosmos, into space, that is. Captain Christopher Barnes, Chief of Training for the 26th Space Aggressor Squadron, says, "We play the bad guys. Our job is to not only understand the different types of threats and potential enemies, but also to be able to portray them and replicate them for the good guys, that is, our Air Force." The 26th and 27th and 527th Space Aggressor Squadrons are headquartered in a two-story warehouse at Colorado's Schriever Air Force Base, stocked with advanced radio and satellite equipment, and nicknamed the Barn. Behind the building, antenna dishes trace the sky. While attacks by the space aggressors are simulated, senior U.S. military and intelligence officials warn the threat in space is very real. America relies heavily on space assets to protect forces around the globe, from launching missiles to directed warship across the seas, and indeed the Global Positioning System, or GPS, is actually a group of 31 high-orbiting satellites owned by the U.S. government and operated by the U.S. Air Force. Some worry that disrupting America's vast network of satellites and ground-based systems could send U.S. forces back to an antiquated era of targeting, communications, and navigation systems, deeply undercutting battlefield superiority. Recently, rhetoric from U.S. military officials about the need to bolster American defensive position and even offensive capabilities in space has ratcheted up amid concerns that Russia and China are rapidly developing anti-satellite weapons. Quote, while we're not at war in space, I don't think we can say we're exactly at peace either, unquote. Vice Admiral Charles Richard, Deputy Commander of U.S. Strategic Command, known as STRATCOM, told a conference in Washington, D.C. recently. He said, "We must prepare for a conflict that extends into space." In his remarks, Vice Admiral Richard pointed to press reports that China is developing an arsenal of lasers, electromagnetic railguns, and high-powered microwave weapons to neutralize America's intelligence, communications, and navigation satellites. And recently, STRATCOM Commander General John Hyten told a Senate committee hearing that in addition to bolstering defense, he says, we have to build an offensive capability to challenge their capabilities in space as well. In that hearing, Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, asked General Hyten to assess the threat to American space assets from other countries like Russia and China. Hyten replied, "It is significant and it is growing. You have to ask yourself why we have adversaries that are building weapons in space, weapons that can deploy into space, weapons that can jam our satellites, weapons that can jam GPS. Why are they building that entire infrastructure? It's not because they are interested in the peaceful use of outer space. It is because they are looking to threaten the United States," he said. The space aggressors aim to simulate attacks a real adversary might use so U.S. forces can practice overcoming them. Charles Barnes said, "We study threats to the space realm, either coming from space or based on land. If we cannot directly replicate them with hardware, then we figure out if there's a software solution or some way we can train people to the point where they can fight through them and if they have to in the conflict. One tactic space aggressors are known to employ is called brute force jamming, which involves sending powerful signals over satellite networks to garble the original message. Many details of the operations, of course, remain secret. And Captain Barnes said some people think space is an Achilles heel for the US, and that if we were to lose our capabilities in space, we may not be able to fight through, said the space aggressor Captain Barnes. And he said, but the better we can train folks, the better they're going to be able to go out there and prove that despite one or another asset falling away, our guys on the ground jointly can still fight through and win the day. In addition to war gaming in a contested space environment, U.S. troops are also training to fight without access to space in case one day they have to. A few years ago, the Air Force held a study called A Day Without Space at the Nellis Air Force Base in southern Nevada that sought to replicate what would happen if American forces were deprived of satellite communications and global positioning data, GPS. General Hayden told the Senate it was not good. We were not ready to do that. Following the study, the military relearned techniques for fighting without access to GPS or satellites, using alternate tools like inertial navigation systems, which do not need orbiting reference points and even compasses and maps, Hayden said. The Department of Defense has spent at least $22 billion in recent years to defend and improve the resiliency of our assets in space and put potential adversary space systems at risk, former U.S. Secretary of Defense Ash Carter wrote in a memo to back then to Obama prior to the end of the administration term. Recently, Air Force announced that it would create a new position for the three-star general to serve as advisor to the Air Force Secretary and Joint Chief of Staff on space issues, effectively a space war czar. In that same month, the Pentagon gave the Joint Interagency Combined Space Operations Center, which went by the confusing handle JICSPOC, a shorter and more descriptive title, the National Space Defense Center. The military also announced a new initiative aimed at deepening defense partnerships in space with U.S. allies, known as the Multinational Space Collaboration Effort. That new measure is to explore methods for increasing shared cooperation and collaboration to preserve the safety of spaceflight and enhance mutual security, Stratcom said in their statement. The first foreign liaison officer from Germany is expected to join the initiative at the Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. Meanwhile, back in Colorado, the space aggressors continue to wage simulated space war to help U.S. troops prepare for a real one. Captain Barnes said, I want them to be able to fight through the environment. The hardest part of doing this job is that you don't really want to win. This is by Greg Walters from Seeker, and it's on Embedded Reality. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.